Okay. You stated in prior podcasts that you are grateful for an understanding wife who allowed you to treat your SEAL career as the number one priority. Do you believe that marriage and children should bring about a reprioritization of your life? Given that marriage now brings another person on your life, a partner, but also someone who relies on you, and especially children who heavily rely on you, how did you reconcile still treating the SEALs as the number one priority? Both a wife and children you brought willingly into your life. Was there a point that, despite having an understanding wife, that you should have made the decision to end the SEAL career early because of people you have a newfound responsibility for? Debatably, a responsibility greater than the responsibility for your career.
So this is something that can be hard for people to understand. But yes, the SEAL teams was my number one priority over my family, over my wife, over my kids, over my own life, over everything. And just FYI, I literally told my wife that before we got married multiple times on the way to the chapel or to the San Diego courthouse to get married. On the way there, on the bridge driving from Coronado to San Diego, I said, hey, listen, I just want to give you one last chance. Being a SEAL is not just what I do, it's who I am, and you are not going to change me. So don't think that I'm going to change. And she was like, oh, I know what you are. You still want to do this? Yes, let's go do it. And what was good was, to her credit, she didn't try and challenge that. She didn't try and fight that. She gave that to me. She understood it. And that's probably one of the reasons why we stayed married for so long. And the SEAL teams, if you don't know this, has about a 90% divorce rate. It's an astronomical divorce rate. And the reason, a lot of it, is because the guys are so dedicated to the SEAL teams that everything else starts taking a back seat. Now, I think that my wife actually saw that I was loyal and I was dedicated to the SEAL teams, and therefore she saw that as something that was positive and something that would transfer over to other parts of my life, including my family. Now, to answer more on this guy's question, I want to think about this. Being a SEAL, the best thing I could do for my family was be dedicated to my job. It was the best thing I could do for the other SEALs I worked with. It was the best thing I could do for myself and for my family, was to be the best SEAL possible. Why? Because we're going into combat. And if I want to come home alive to my family and I want my brothers to come home alive to their families, the best thing we could possibly do for our families is to be totally dedicated to the job so that we're ready, we're prepared, and we can bring each other back. So that's the way it is. And I would stand by that to this day. And it actually does transfer in many cases to normal civilian careers, because being hardworking and being dedicated to your job generally is going to translate to being more successful in your job. And if you're more successful in your job, you have more financial stability. Right? If you have more financial stability, how many fights in families take place because of finances? I think that's probably the leading cause of problems in families, is there's financial strain. And so I think that it does translate somewhat to people in their normal careers, even if they're not SEALs, even if they're not preparing for war, that they're trying to do a good job. They're being dedicated to their jobs so that they can perform better and have more stability in their lives. And by the way, when you work harder, you get rewarded more. It also eventually translates into more freedom, because you move into a leadership position. Maybe you go into a situation where you're no longer working for somebody directly and they're over you and they're demanding. Now all of a sudden you get a little bit more freedom. You can dictate what happens in your life more. So that's important as well. And also, on top of all that, guess what? The way you act and the way you carry yourself, you are actually teaching your family and your children something. Now, if you're a warrior, if you're a military guy, if you're then your children, guess what? Warriors have been going away to war for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And people have been just fine from that. The men have been raised by their moms because their dad was gone away to war. That's the way it is. So I think that that's okay. It doesn't mean that the warrior doesn't love his family. He does, but he's got a job to do and he's going to go do it. And also, if you apply that to a normal civilian situation, if your children see that you are dedicated, that you are hardworking, that you are loyal, that's a positive example that you're setting for your kids. Now, of course, they shouldn't be thinking, and I never came home to my kids and said, hey, look, you're number 2 on the list of priorities around here.
Right.
Now, I might have said, listen, I've got a job to do. I've got guys that are depending on me. We're going to combat. Bad things can happen. I need to be ready, and I need to be ready for my guys. And I need to be ready for you. And so I don't think you need to throw it in people's face and say, no, you're the number 2 priority. But your family should understand that you're working hard for them. You're building their future. You're building a legacy for your family. That's what you're doing when you're working hard at any job. So I think that's a good example to set. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that example. Now, where people can go too far, which of course they can do it in the military, they can do it in their civilian career, where the job becomes not just the short-term priority. Because I will say this, my long-term priority was my family. Right? That was the long-term priority. I mean, I had my wife and kids, I'm going to raise them. They're going to be with me forever. That's what I'm doing with my life. Mm-hmm. So the long-term priority is definitely the family. But the short-term priority, and by short-term, I'm talking years, right? 2 years, 5 years, 3 years. That's a short-term priority compared to your family, which is going to be with you until you die. Mm-hmm. And so I think you need to keep that in mind and make sure that you're not sacrificing things long term. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you're going to destroy your marriage because you're working so hard, you got problems. If you're going to destroy your marriage because you're dedicated too much to your job, that's not supporting the long-term strategy of taking care of your family. Yeah. So that's sort of where I come out on that. And again, tons of credit to my wife and my kids who were, I was gone all the time and they dealt with it. And guess what? I'm gone a lot too now. Yeah. I'm traveling all the time. Right. And again, they all know that, hey, I'd love to be staying home with them, but I've got to take care of the family. I've got to support the family. I've got to maintain my situation so that I can take care of them if something bad were to happen.
Yeah.
And I think they understand that.
Yeah, and I think that's a big component where, your wife and your kids, they do understand. And I'm assuming, given, what I know about you guys is that you're pretty clear through what you say and what you do that you are supporting them and they are part of your, because some people, let's say, I don't know, just this is a hypothetical situation, but let's say a cop, right? Or detective, he's real into his job. He's frustrated with the job, and this goes for any job. He comes home, he's frustrated because whatever, work stuff. He comes home, but he's not dedicated to his relationship or his family that much. So he allows the frustrations of work to
carry over.
He takes it out on his wife because she said, do the dishes, you forgot, whatever. And then he's even more mad because he's frustrated with work, like that kind of thing where, he kind of, in the back of his mind, he regards his family as something that should, I don't know, serve him while he does his, real lot in life, which is be an amazing detective, So I think a lot of times there's that. And then on top of it, the family wife, we'll just say the wife, has these expectations that are not clear. not correct, put it that way, where, you should be home at a certain time. You shouldn't be working late.
That was the worst.
We're your family.
That's the worst, is like, I'm not coming home. Like, oh, I'm done with work in the SEAL teams. Oh, I'm done with work, but I'm going to the bar with the guys, and I'll be home at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And guess what? My wife actually understood that. She actually understood that, hey, these guys are a team. These guys are a family of their own right. And I got to let him go and develop and hang out with his friends, because he's got to know these guys better than anybody in the world.
Yeah, see, and that's
a hard thing for some people to handle.
Yeah, and that one you got to be careful with. Navy SEALs, to me, yeah, it's absolutely true and legitimate. But some guys might use that as like an excuse just to not have to come home and wash dishes.
Of course, with the wife, then they're wrong.
Right. So kind of be careful with that one. Like I don't know, a sales guy, he closes a deal and guys want to celebrate. Meanwhile, it's, I don't know, Mother's Day or something. I don't know, something.
Or Thursday.
Yeah, you need that, and, I don't think it's unreasonable for wives to have certain expectations, especially if you don't address them, like, you don't communicate or whatever. Like, you have expectations. You have an expectation for your husband to come home after work. You do. So if he just doesn't show up all of a sudden, I mean, I'm assuming you're going to tell your wife, hey, I'm not going to, this is why, just like, are you saying, you're going to explain everything. But some guys, they're like, I'm the man. I don't have to come home right now if I don't want to, which is kind of true, but you're in a relationship. You're in a team, especially.
Yeah, and really, I would say one thing that's awesome about my wife is I would say, oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't come home. I was going out with the boys.
Yeah.
And she was independent enough and secure enough and confident enough that she was like, oh, okay, whatever. Hey, I'm going to do this most of the time.
Yeah.
There were some times flowers were bought, things were rebuilt, because it's life.
Right. Yeah. And no one's going to be like 100% focused on that, that situation or the your goal, how you say, you said, I'm a Navy SEAL, don't change me or whatever. That's not going to be on the front of her mind 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. She's a person, and she loves
people
you,
always think they can change you.
Yeah. And even if they know ultimately they can't, they still, for a day, they might, you know, and it can go back, so back and forth. So yeah, it's not going to go perfect, but as long, just like how you're saying, you communicated that early and she is a strong enough person to be like, understand that and understand the value of that throughout the whole process, then you're going to have success with that kind of thing. But it depends on how good you communicate it and how willing your wife or husband or whatever the situation is. Depends on how good they can receive it and go through it.
Yeah.
Because some people are needy, man.
Yeah. And though, a lot of military, I've been talking to a lot of military people that listen to the podcast, spouses and service members. And so, yeah, guess what? Give your service member some room to form those bonds, to be dedicated to that job, because they are truly doing it for you. They really are. They're doing it for you. And now, service members, as Echo just said, don't abuse the privilege.
Yeah.
Don't abuse it. Do what you got to do. Be the best you can be at your job. Bond with your brothers in arms that you're going on the battlefield with. Whether you're a cop, whether you're a firefighter, build those bonds. But, of course, don't abuse it, and make sure you take care of your family, too.
Yeah.